welcome to the Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinx. My name is Chris, and with me as always is Mike. How are you doing today, sir?
Oh, ready and waiting.
Ooh, all right, well then I will move on to Justin. How are you doing? He's also with us on a regular basis.
Thank you. Yes, I am. I'm usually here.
Yeah.
Today I'm here. I am even more ready than Mike and even more waiting than Mike. I'm waiting even harder.
Wow, this isn't a contest, guys. We're all on the same team, all right?
Wait hard too. Wait harder.
Yeah, that's the sequel to the 2005-ish film Waiting, right?
Yep. That's
we
the
all
one.
remember that classic coming to Criterion soon.
If this is your first time joining us, we do like to start off every episode talking about what is on our minds, which is usually the media that we've been watching or reading that week. And then we'll move into our feature review. This week, we are reviewing the new DC film, Shazam.
Don't forget that each month we review a film from the Criterion Collection. It's voted on by you, the listeners. So go check out our latest episode on Safety Last, and then make sure that you go and vote in our poll. It's on Twitter right now. It's Brief Encounter, The Tree of Life, and Stalker. Brief Encounter was Mike's choice. The Tree of Life was mine, so please vote for that one. And then Stalker is Justin's choice.
Yeah, so help us decide what we review on the next Casually Criterion.
And if you want to go to our Twitter or even our Facebook and Instagram, those are all at Casual Cinecast. And if you want to send in your questions for us to answer on the show about the movies that we're reviewing each week, you can send those to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can also email those to casualcinemedia@gmail.com. And then, of course, as always, if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe to it on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on, or go give us a 5-star review on iTunes if you haven't yet. Those help people find the show.
Absolutely. Thanks in advance.
You're welcome. I'm answering for the listener.
Oh, thank you.
Did you rate us 5 stars?
I did.
Oh, good job.
Yeah. I like the show.
Big fan.
Yeah. I listen every week.
All right. Are we ready to move into what's on our minds?
Absolutely.
I am.
You on the mark!
All right, Justin.
Yes, sir.
Old buddy, old pal. What's been on your mind this week?
Well, this week I rewatched 2 films that I'd seen before. Other than some of the other films that we're going to be talking about on this episode, I didn't really watch anything new. So I revisited some stuff, one of which is a film that I used to watch a lot and I used to really like, but I've been hesitant, I guess, to watch it again because I've been worried that it's not going to hold up or it's going to seem bad. And that film is Old School.
Was this in preparation for The Joker?
Yes.
Nice.
It was. Okay. Actually, funny enough, I bought this at Barnes & Noble because it was on sale. And I think I bought it like 3 days before the Joker trailer came out. And I completely forgot that Todd Phillips was directing the Joker trailer. So I bought it. I had it sitting like on my coffee table.
He also directed the movie.
Yeah, just the trailer.
Not just the Joker trailer.
Oh, good point. But anyways, it was sitting there on my coffee table, like waiting to be watched soon. And yeah, the Joker trailer came out and I was like, oh, great. This is a perfect excuse to watch it. But I will say that this film, to me, completely held up. I think it's very, very funny still. And I guess my big worry on it not being funny was the run that Will Ferrell went on not too long after Old School. Of course, he did some good stuff with like Elf and I like Anchorman personally. But kind of after that, a lot of the stuff with Will Ferrell leaves like a bad taste in my mouth in regards to Will Ferrell, right? I don't know if you guys feel that way.
Oh, yeah, that accurately describes everything. Everything you've said about Old School so far, your hesitation to revisit it and everything is exactly my thoughts.
Right. So the thing that I will point out about this, of course, is that it is not starring Will Ferrell. Will Ferrell is essentially the third most important character in it. So he's not dominating it. Luke Wilson is the main character, and then his 2 friends are Vince Vaughn and Will Ferrell. And Vince Vaughn is arguably a little bit more important of a character. Maybe they're about equal, but Vince Vaughn is carrying a little bit more in terms of the comedy. I'll say that. And I don't know. I think this film is really funny. There's some issues that now that we're in 2019, the film does some things that probably aren't that politically correct and would probably be seen as not funny by some people, but those are pretty far and few in between. and kind of like throwaway things, nothing too important. But the movie, like, it's really funny. It had me laughing from start to finish. I'm a big fan of Vince Vaughn and his humor.
Yeah. What was like watching some Vince Vaughn comedy after Dragged Across Concrete last week?
Well, he's got a lot of the same comedic timing, like in both films, really.
Yeah, he's pretty funny in Dragged Across Concrete, actually.
Yeah, so it was kind of the same almost. Like, it obviously
Yeah.
not. He's
it's
not
not
like
Return to Paradise or anything.
Sure, yeah, or The Cell, or the Psycho remake. But he's really funny in this. I think that it's worth revisiting. Like, if you like this film, or if you've never seen it, which my fiance had not ever seen it, and we had recently rewatched Step Brothers, which we both, I never liked it. She had never seen it, and we both agreed it's really terrible after watching it.
I haven't seen it since theaters, but I remember it not fondly.
This was my third rewatch. The second one was with my brother, who insisted it was funny after I didn't like it the first time in theaters. And
I still have nightmares about the scene where they're sleepwalking.
Yes.
And they're like tearing up the kitchen, and it goes on for much too long.
Yeah. There's a lot of scenes in that movie that give me nightmares, just mostly because they get quoted a lot. And I'm like, you're quoting a movie I don't find funny, and this is weird for me. I don't know what to do. But anyways, well, coming off of watching Step Brothers, we were a little hesitant about Old School, specifically my fiance, because she hated Step Brothers so much, but she even thought it was really great. So highly recommend. I think it's a quality comedy from like the mid 2000s, before those comedies took that really crazy turn that they did with like Talladega Nights and Step Brothers and Semi-Pro and all that.
So let me ask you this, Todd Phillips comedies and everything in consideration, I would say the movie that I look at most fondly out of Todd Phillips's career as like the most successful comedy would probably be either Old School or the very first Hangover movie. Yeah. What is your opinion on the Hangover movies? Do you think that like in an alternative universe, like if Old School had come out the same year the Hangover had and been a big hit, do you think we would have gotten like two more Old Schools that get progressively darker and less funny as they go on?
I mean, yeah, I think we would have, probably. Yeah. Which pains me to say that, because I think those Hangover 2 and 3 movies really ruined the first one in a sense, because I can't watch it without knowing that sequels exist and how dark they are.
The second one might be one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I hate it.
Yeah, I never watched the third one because I hated the second one so much.
Yeah. I remember as the second one was going on, I was like, this is just ugly and depressing.
Yeah.
And dark.
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of the first Hangover, and I think if you haven't ever seen Old School and you like the first Hangover, or even if you have seen Old School and haven't revisited it because of the other Hangover films, I think it's good, and it has no sequels to like drag you down and think about.
That's true. And say what you will about the other Hangover movies, that actually leads me to believe that he could probably make a better Joker movie than if he hadn't made something so dark.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And we can talk about the Joker trailer briefly, I guess. It looks pretty dark. It looks pretty interesting. I was not interested in the movie at all until I saw the trailer, and I think it looks really interesting and potentially pretty good. What do you guys think?
Same. I also don't really have any, I wouldn't say I have expectations, but the trailer made me curious, and Todd Phillips has me curious, and Joaquin Phoenix is probably the thing that gives me the most confidence.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I was curious before all this, like Robert De Niro, Joaquin Phoenix in a Joker movie already just kind of has my curiosity, and I want to see it. And then the trailer looked good. And so I'm interested in seeing what happens. It could still be awful. I mean, a lot of the DC movies have good trailers or fun trailers, and the movie turns out to not be that great. But
it looks a lot like Taxi Driver. If you read some of his jokes he was scribbling on his little paper in the trailer, a lot of it's he focuses a lot on the rich. So I think the movie is going to be him building towards killing Bruce Wayne's dad or something. Like a Taxi Driver type moment.
That'd be interesting.
Because you can see him antagonizing Bruce Wayne in the trailer.
Oh, can you? Bruce Wayne is a boy?
Bruce Wayne.
Ah.
Yeah. He's got the red clown nose on.
Interesting.
I think he's stalking Bruce. So I think this is going to be an origin for Batman as well. Probably But that's just completely speculation based on the trailer.
I actually feel like this movie will be better if Batman isn't in it and it has nothing to do with superheroes. It's just...
Nah, you're going to have to tie it. I don't think they're going to, like, sequel bait it, like, intend to, like, launch a franchise off this movie, but I think you have to have Bruce Wayne in a Joker movie. It makes no sense to have Joker running amok by himself without any Batman iconography. Otherwise, it's just a movie about a crazy person.
Yeah. I'm hoping that he's tangentially in there, like in the world, Bruce Wayne exists at least.
Right, but we're not going to see Batman, I don't think.
Yeah, I hope not. I am with you on the Taxi Driver thing. I've seen a lot of comparisons to Taxi Driver. I really love that they've made Gotham, at least I assume it's Gotham, look like that 1970s grungy, dirty New York of Taxi Driver and of like Midnight Cowboy, where it seems very kind of disgusting and you don't want to walk out on the streets, which parts of New York are like that.
Yeah, I also get some King of Comedy vibes, too. Scorsese.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's about a failed comedian, and everything. Yeah. So anyway, that's...
And there is a shot, like, in the trailer where someone's coming out and it looks like sort of like a late night talk show or something in front of, like, a curtain. And they're in one of those jackets. I don't know. I've only watched the trailer once and that happened really quickly, so I didn't catch it. Yeah. But I believe you.
Cool. So yeah,
that's
Todd
it
Phillips.
For the Joker trailer and the old school talk, I suppose. So we can move on to the other thing that I rewatched, which is a much newer film. And this is in preparation for Avengers Endgame, which is coming out in just a couple of weeks now. My fiance and I watched Captain Marvel. She really liked it, so she is suddenly now interested in Avengers Endgame, whereas she hasn't watched any of these Marvel movies with me over the last year and a half. And so I told her, in order to catch up, we need to watch at least Black Panther and Avengers Infinity War. So we watched Black Panther this weekend. And this was my second rewatch. And I want to say, other than some of the early Marvel movies, this is the first Marvel movie in a long time that I've actually watched for a second time, which was an interesting experience. Most of them I watch once and I'm done, right?
Yeah. What an occasion.
So write it down.
So put it in your journal. Is it better or worse than you remember?
Both, but mostly better.
All right.
The things that I did not like about it the first time kind of stuck out even harder to me, which is primarily the humor and some of the dialogue and some of the acting from some of the tangential characters. All of the main characters are really good, but the stuff that I really liked, some of the action sequences, the costumes and like the whole set design of like Wakanda and stuff, it was all pretty cool. And then of course the Michael B. Jordan villain character is great and is even better on a second rewatch when you're like, I know where he's going, so watching him in the beginning makes a lot more sense and is really interesting. So
yeah, I can imagine.
I really liked it, and I think that it's also interesting watching it with the knowledge that it became a Best Picture nominee. And watching it through that lens, you know what I mean? You kind of look at it and like, is this Best Picture nominee worthy? And honestly, for this year, probably. In a normal year, no. But I mean, watching it again, I get it.
Deserves to be nominated more than Green Book does.
Totally, yeah. Compared to like the other films that I saw way later, because remember, Black Panther came out in what, like March or February of last year. So when I was watching all the other nominees towards the end of the year, I was remembering Black Panther, but watching it now, having seen all those films, it's like, oh yeah, totally deserved to be up there compared to a lot of stuff that was on that list.
I would actually be curious to rewatch this myself. I watched all the MCU movies last year in preparation for Infinity War, but I think Black Panther was the only one I actually didn't rewatch because it was still in theaters at the time.
Yeah.
So actually Avengers is like next week, so probably not, but
yeah,
soon.
I mean, I'm sure you remember it well enough, I don't think it needs to be rewatched.
Yeah, probably not.
In order to like enjoy Endgame, but on a rewatch, it's still good. Like, I think it's just as good, if not maybe slightly better, rewatching it and revisiting some of the themes and stuff, and especially revisiting a great villain. Like, it's really fun to revisit him.
Are you going to rewatch any other MCU movies before Endgame?
Just Infinity War.
Okay.
I think I might try to squeeze in Spider-Man Homecoming, because I have not seen that one yet.
Oh, yeah. That would actually be pretty similar in tone to Shazam, or more similar to Shazam than anything else.
Well, hopefully I liked Shazam, so stay tuned.
We'll see.
Cool. But yeah, that is it, unless any of you guys have anything to add on Black Panther.
Not I.
No, I'm good.
All right, cool. Well, that is it for what is on my mind. So, Mike, what is on your mind?
So since this Sunday is the premiere of Season 8 of Game of Thrones...
Yay.
Yeah, my girlfriend and I decided to finish our rewatch of the series. So we watched all seasons 1 through 7, and it was nice to have a chance to revisit it all, like in one piece, and not have to divide it up by like years of conversation and months of speculation.
How long did it take you?
It probably took us about a month and a half of casual watching whenever we wanted to. Yeah. Once we got to like season 7, it gets very bingeable, you know? Mm-hmm. Watching this show again, you can see so much foreshadowing. Like after seasons 5 through 7 started to like venture beyond the books and started setting up more of where things are going, you can go back and see like the seeds that were planted years ago.
Interesting.
And it's pretty cool. Like actually knowing some things that used to bother me when I first watched the show don't seem so annoying now. Mm-hmm. I mean, a couple things are more annoying in retrospect. Like it's not perfect show by any means, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that's the nature of something like this that's so big when it comes out, and it seems like it could be about anything, right? Like there are so many characters and the future is wide open because you've never seen a show like this before. I mean, it could be about politics or it could be about, you know, Starks versus Lannisters or whatever. But as the show moves towards its end point, it starts to become more obvious about what the story we are actually seeing is, you know, and who the main characters are.
Right.
You know, some of the later seasons and even the earlier ones, I think really benefit from being able to binge them. I think the nature of having so many characters in a show so large is that a lot of times, like week to week, when you're watching it like that, you're only checking in with certain characters for like 5 minutes at a time. And a lot of times they're just walking or skinning rabbits or talking about history stories within the universe, you know? Mm-hmm. And seemingly that doesn't add up to a whole lot in a single episode. And it kind of leave you uninterested in entire plot lines for years, you know? Because, oh, it's time to check in with so-and-so while he's walking. But that said, I think that's just the nature of long-form storytelling like this. Like when you spend years in the middle of Act 2 of a story and you're working towards a specific ending, that means it's going to be very unpleasant and kind of drag from week to week. But again, watching it in this binge form, it's a lot more of like instantaneous payoff.
Yeah, you don't have to sit around and speculate on what might happen. You can just watch the next episode.
Right, you know. And when you only check in with a character for 5 minutes and their overall plot doesn't advance, you're not as frustrated.
Right.
Whereas, like, I mean, there are certain characters that, like, for an entire season, it seems like nothing is happening, but it's all character work. And it pays off later down the road. But it's not readily obvious when you're watching it week to week and you're like, why am I watching this torture porn or something that, like, two people talk about a history lesson, you know? Mm-hmm. So, obviously, we don't know how the major series ends, but we know how a lot of characters have ended that aren't on the show anymore. And watching their arcs play out from beginning to end is really interesting, and I think all the foreshadowing is there, and I will be interested to see exactly how this show is going to end, and I'm pretty sure everyone's going to hate it when it does.
Well, we'll all fight it out on Twitter, the people that hate it and the people that don't, and everything's settled in the court of public opinion now, so even if you do like it, you know, on Twitter, you'll get into fights, and that's where it'll really go down.
Yeah. I will say that when you have the ability to binge it, it really helps the later seasons where the writing isn't as rich as when they had all that book material that they could adapt, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it really helps to watch it quickly and not speculate week to week, you know, as the show becomes more of like an action movie.
That makes sense, yeah.
Or more like a it's like entering the Return of the King phase of like this epic story, right? Where it's like the payoff and all the battles, and we're done with most of the character work.
Right.
So let me ask you this. This comes out this Sunday, so I'm not sure what day this will come out, but as of time of recording, that's like 5 days from now?
Right. Correct. The 14th.
Okay, so my question, should I quit my job so that I can watch all of Game of Thrones in time for Sunday? Is it worth it?
I think you already know the answer to that.
Yeah.
And the answer is yes.
Oh, okay. I was actually curious as to what the answer was, because I didn't know.
Me too. That's why I asked.
Yeah.
I would say you've seen season 1 of Game of Thrones, right?
That's true, but there's still a lot to watch.
That's true. But what I would say is if season 1 didn't compel you to just watch it as it came out regularly, casually, then I can't imagine you would be very happy with yourself 74 hours later when you don't have a job.
Yeah, okay.
Wait,
I mean, that's fair.
Did you like the first season?
That's fine.
Okay.
I just you know, like Mike said, I think it put it best, is like I haven't been compelled to watch the second season or anything else yet. And that's not to say I didn't like it or it was no good. It's just I haven't had that itch.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
But yes, I think you should definitely watch the whole show. And I think you should binge it when possible.
But not quit my job. I should hold on to that.
No, you should probably not quit your job, because I feel like if this was your thing, it would have manifested itself somehow by now.
Yeah. I like my job too, so.
Oh, that's even better.
I'm relieved.
Yeah.
Oof.
Crisis averted. Yeah. All right. So anyway, one day I hope that George R. R. Martin still finishes his books so we can get the nuanced, bigger version of this already very large story. But if this is the only version we ever get, I can learn to live with that, as long as they stick the landing in this last 6 episodes and it doesn't drop off any worse in quality than like what they've already done with no books, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which I don't think the show ever gets bad. I just think it goes from like really, really nuanced and intelligent writing to just,
Lord of the
paying
Rings.
off all that stuff. You know?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. If he does finish the book, would you prefer his book to be a more fleshed out version of the events that happen in the TV show, or would you like him to finish it and disregard the TV show if that does not mesh with his original vision or something?
At this point, he has to do his own thing. Like, there are characters in full swing in the books going on right now where he left off that were never even brought into the TV show. So the TV show is already like a very, very, very trimmed down version of the books. So if he were to adapt the show and stop adapting his own thing, he would still have to write off a whole bunch of characters, like hundreds of characters in the books that aren't in the show.
Right. Okay. So it's cool being like an alternate history, alternate version of
Yeah,
events.
I actually read an interview with the showrunners today, and they were saying that at this point, they are simply not going to talk about what George R. R. Martin told them about the ending. That way, whenever he finally does release his book, there will still be plenty of surprises because people won't know what was theirs and what was his. Which I think is the smartest way for them to do it, and it's the most respectful to George R. R. Martin.
Cool. That makes sense.
Yeah, so that does it for my Game of Thrones rewatch. If anyone else has rewatched it and has a different take on the show, let me know. Let me know if you find it better or worse to binge it, or the same, or you don't care.
Yeah, write in to let us know that you don't care.
Yeah. All right, guys, the other thing that I have been watching this week is something I believe we all watched in case we needed to do a review, and that is Pet Sematary. Am I right?
Yes.
I watched it.
I watched
certainly
it.
did.
What do you guys say we give like a little bit of our thoughts here, but keep it spoiler free?
Sounds
Of course,
good.
as always in our What's on Our Mind. I'm
All right,
down.
cool. So I'll go ahead and kick it off. This is a movie that I was mostly enjoying until all of a sudden I wasn't.
Oh.
Yeah, I have not seen the original 80s version, like the original Pet Sematary movie, nor have I read the book. So I didn't really know what to expect. I had no expectations really at all. And for the most part, I think this film is a moody, slow burn. And a lot of the horror is a big old metaphor for grief and dealing with it. And when the movie is operating on that level, I think it works pretty well. The performances are all there. You know, Jason Clarke, I think, is really good. John Lithgow is good. But I think it starts to come undone for me about 30 minutes before the end of the movie. And it starts to get a lot more like a typical horror film. And without getting too specific, I will say that it is scarier when certain things are left mysterious. And maybe showing less and talking about things less is a better way to go.
Yes. The mystery of the unknown
Yeah.
is always better than the answers or the direct, like, looking at it, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard to talk about it without spoilers. It's very hard to talk about it. But
Sure.
basically, the more I understand of how all of this Pet Sematary works, the less I care. Like, I think to get those like audience-pleasing scary moments in the final act is what they were trying to do. But that's where I began to turn on the movie, I think, is whenever it starts to try to deliver the average, bland type horror movie scares. And I feel like it's a betrayal of the movie I just got done spending an hour and a half with. Overall, I enjoyed the bleakness of the movie, and in broad strokes, I like everything that happens. Just not the execution.
Interesting. Yeah. So I'm with you on the, I guess, the later part of the film not being as good and definitely being a turning point where I felt more negative about the film than I had to that point. The place where I guess I'll disagree is that I did not quite feel as strongly about the film even before that point. Like, I definitely felt way more negative. There's a point where it gets worse than it was previously, but even up to that point, I was already feeling in the bit more typical horror film realm as far as how I felt about it. Like, it didn't really feel anything more than like barely above average.
Well, it's up and down, right? Like, there's a lot of things that I'm like, meh, but the movie really started to come alive for me whenever Jason Clarke's character starts making decisions.
Yes.
Like mid-act 2, right? And that's when I was like, oh, okay, I am more interested in this movie than I thought I was. And then they keep going with that, and then I found out I wasn't as interested.
Yes.
But for a minute there, for like a good 30 minutes in the middle of everything, the movie had me, and I was willing to overlook a lot of problems I had with dialogue and execution up to that point, if the movie had gone a cooler place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Go ahead, Chris, what did you think?
I kind of I'm closer to Justin on this one. The decision that you're talking about, Mike, so vaguely, I never really bought into his motivation in making that decision. I mean, I understand. All right. Anyways, we'll skip over that since it's spoilers. But what I'll say is it was really hard to watch this movie and not be constantly reminded of Hereditary, which was a much better movie that dealt with grief. And I thought, I just was constantly reminded of Hereditary and how much better it was dealing with the grief. And there's a decision. Yeah, I can't really talk about that. But yeah, so I just don't really quite buy into it. I think there's a lot of jump scares that make it feel like a average horror movie. Not that a good horror movie doesn't have jump scares, but the jump scares just felt like a typical horror movie to me. Yeah, average, and then I think you're right. In the last act, it goes to places that isn't good. So yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on Pet Sematary. Yeah. And the other thing was, and this may be on me because I've never seen the 1980s Pet Sematary, and I've never read the short story or the book by Stephen King. But the trailers, which I usually try to avoid, and it like popped on like during a YouTube video or like before I watched something on Hulu or something, but it like gave away the twist, like that happens like halfway through the movie. So I was a little disappointed in the marketing.
I'm sure it's pretty frustrating for people who are familiar with it because the story's been around for so long that like I feel like most people know what this movie is, and I feel like we were probably in the minority in not knowing that going in.
That's true, but I had
no idea.
I read the differences, and this may be a spoiler too.
Yeah, I looked into the differences, and I actually think that the original version would alleviate a lot of problems I have with the third act. It would still be not ultimately a disappointing movie, I think. But
yeah,
there's a switch that they do in this new version. It's like an adaptation switch. They switched the fate of two characters in the family. And I think the result of doing that is like, it creates like a butterfly effect where like, okay, it's a different person making these decisions. So now they have to act differently than the other person would have. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, there's some monologue happening, and then there's some talking happening, and you're like, oh, God, this sucks.
Right.
If there was no talking happening, and it was just mysterious, it might have a better chance of coming out the other side. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I agree with that. But I also think, so everybody that's seen it already is expecting it to go one way. And by revealing what happens in the trailers and that it's different, I think that would have been a cool experience to think you know what you're going to get when you go into the movies, and then all of a sudden they turn it on you. That would have been an interesting experience as opposed to the trailers giving it away.
Yeah, do you think that they put that sort of thing in the trailer for the people who have seen it and like, oh, you think you know this story, but look at this. Like, this isn't something that happened, so this is worth your while to see something different.
I mean, I think the reason they put it in the trailers is because to get people, there's a scary little girl, essentially is what was in the trailer. And to get people to come into the movie, I think it's a marketable thing. That's kind of how I feel. Yeah.
I think the production values in this film are like really good. I think the actual Pet Sematary looks really good, really creepy. I think a lot of my problem with this film is encapsulated in one scene, which is not a spoiler scene. So I will go ahead and just lay it out here. There is a scene where Jason Clarke's character is talking to his neighbor, played by John Lithgow. And John Lithgow has lived in this place his whole life, so he's very familiar with all the land. And Jason Clarke's character just recently bought the land that they are moving to. And they're like, hey, how far back does our property go? And John Lithgow says something to the effect of like, it goes much further back than you'd ever want to go. And then there's like this really ominous glance and he kind of like stares off, you know? And it's like,
Sure.
What a stupid thing to say. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
if someone said that to me and I was like, how far back does my property go? And he's like, further than you'd ever want to go. I'd be like, that's not true.
Yeah, I want to go there.
I want to know where my property ends. That's a stupid thing to say
Did
to
you
me
not
right
hear
now.
my question?
That's not an answer to my question, sir or madam.
I think that kind of perfectly encapsulates, like, if they hadn't said that line, that scene would have been fine.
Yeah. And I think John Lithgow doesn't necessarily, his character doesn't stick to that line of thinking. You know, I think he changes his mind and does different things that are kind of against his character.
Well,
you know?
I mean, that I think has character work. I think there's work done in the movie for John Lithgow's character to be I think of all the movie's shortcomings, I think his motivations are not one of them.
I don't totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, we can't talk about it, no spoilers, but there's lots of stuff in his house and things that I think you can unpack.
Possibly, yeah.
Sure.
I mean, and what I will agree with you on is the acting is really great from John Lithgow and Jason Clarke and the wife. I think they're all really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's for me, for lots and lots of the decisions that the characters make throughout the movie, the script work and the character work for me is not done enough where I understand why they're doing what they're doing. Especially sometimes they're making decisions with like full knowledge. Like they're not making decisions and not knowing what they're going, like what's going to happen or what
Right. Well, I mean,
the ramifications might be, but you know what I mean? And they just still
yes,
do
I
it,
mean,
and I don't
he
understand.
addresses that in the movie. Like John Lithgow, like he talks about how like the pet cemetery draws you to it, right? Like that thing that makes the pet cemetery what it is has a certain power to it. Like Chris said, it's a lot like Hereditary, and I think, but just not done in a way that's like as satisfying to unpack. It's done in a lot more like telegraphed way. That's like it's just by the numbers, and so they're taking like what I imagine to be a good story, and they're trying to fit it into a movie that it's not, with like thrills and jump scares, like Chris was saying, and it needs to be a movie like Hereditary.
Yeah, I would say that there's a difference between a character saying something and it feeling true. You know what I mean? And I think, going along with what you're saying, that more time developing those things so that when a character does say something, I felt like they've set that up enough for it to ring true with me emotionally and me like to connect with it and understand why that character actually feels that. But so less time with the scary stuff and more time developing characters, I think would do this movie a favor, which is kind of, I think, what you're saying too.
Right.
Yeah, like that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like I'm saying in broad strokes, everything that happens, like the story that Stephen King wrote, I imagine to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like if you explain to me like this is about a family that does this and then this happens and then this happens and it all ends this way, I'd have been like, all right, that sounds interesting. But it's entirely the delivery of everything that happens.
Yeah, I agree totally with that. Like I want to read the book now after seeing this, to be honest.
Yeah.
I actually have a friend that's reading it right now and she really likes it. So
yeah. So I think ultimately what I was hoping for with this was another entry into these Stephen King remakes, which I say remakes, but maybe it's just been chapter 1 that was really good, that I really liked and was a very interesting and compelling and quite good Stephen King remake / adaptation. Mm-hmm. I was hoping this would be another entry into, that category, but it's not quite that.
Yeah, that's one of the things. I was so excited for this, and like looking back, I'm like, why was I excited? And I think it's for that same kind of reason. Like we've had so many great horror movies over the last year or so, and then Stephen King's It. So I thought that this was going to maintain that I don't know, what is the word?
Level of quality?
Yeah, that level of quality. But it just doesn't. It's more average to bad for me.
I will say it's not even in like the top 3 worst Stephen King adaptations. Like it's not a unwatchable movie.
Yeah, that's probably
right?
very true. Yeah.
If you're a fan of Stephen King, see the movie. It's different than the story you remember, and some people like it. That said, if you're not a fan of this story and Stephen King, I don't think you're going to be as generous to it. And there are other cooler horror movies that deal with very similar themes that are executed way better and respects your intelligence more. And, like Hereditary, we've mentioned it like 5 times. Just watch Hereditary instead of this.
Yeah.
Sure. And if you ever move to a small town and buy land with a weird pet cemetery and people ask you to do certain things, ask more questions.
Yeah.
Before you just agree.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. So, I would give Pet Sematary either 2 or 2.5 stars. I don't know which.
I'm at a good 2, but I would understand why you'd want to give it 2.5.
The thing is, like, if we could talk about it in spoilers and really dive into it, I could figure it out.
We'll do that off air.
Yeah, maybe sometime. But
Yeah.
Let's move on. Are we ready to move into our review of Shazam?
Yes. Are you an adult now? Did you finally grow up?
Yeah, you guys don't even know what just happened to me. But
I don't think I want to.
Yeah.
Did you just grow up like also exponentially? So now you're like 14 feet tall? Or 12, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah. I did some post-editing to make my voice sound the exact same as it was so that you wouldn't be able to be distracted.
Thank you. You're just like much taller and further away from the mic.
Yep. I had to stand accordingly to make my voice sound the exact same, but I'm actually in a completely different position.
You should just say Shazam again and become a
I will whenever we move on and I get to read the name in the segment. So let's
All right,
let's
do
move on.
that.
Yeah.
Daily Bats. I choose you as champion. Say my name so my powers will become yours. Shazam.
Wait, for real?
Say the key! Say my name.
That's crazy, right?
What are your superpowers?
Superpowers, dude? I don't even know how to pee in this thing.
This is proof of authenticity. Super strength. Electricity manipulation. Hyperspeed.
I'd like to purchase some of your finest beer, please.
Okay, so as always, for our feature reviews, we will have a non-spoiler section first, where we will be speaking generally about our opinions of the movie without spoiling anything, and then we will give you a spoiler alert and a warning before we move into spoilers and start spoiling the film so that you can hit pause on the podcast, go see the film, come back, finish listening. You're welcome.
All right, guys. So Shazam, directed by David F. Sandberg, starring Zachary Levi, Mark Strong, Asher Angel, and Jack Dylan Grazer. The IMDb synopsis says, "We all have a superhero inside us. It just takes a bit of magic to bring it out. In Billy Batson's case, by shouting the word Shazam, this streetwise 14-year-old kid can turn into the grown-up superhero, Shazam."
Sneaking a tagline in the synopsis on us.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Yeah. Does a pretty good job, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, guys, who wants to kick off their thoughts on Shazam? I vote Justin.
Yeah, I was going to volunteer.
Yeah.
We're like on the same mind length, even though you're like 7 feet taller than me.
Yeah, I know. Well, I said Shazam again, so I'm back down.
Oh, but you just
I
said it again.
So Shazam. Shit.
This is going to get confusing.
Oh, no.
Count along at home and see if you can tell how tall Mike is at different points.
By the end of the episode.
All right. Yes, I will go first on my opinion of Shazam. So, did not really know much about Shazam. Did not really know much about this movie until I just randomly saw a trailer in front of some film that we've watched within the last few months. And I liked the trailer. I thought it looked like it was going to be sort of an interesting take on the superhero film in the sense that it was going to be a lot more lighthearted, a lot funnier. It's reminiscent of a Tom Hanks film, Big, that I really like. I'm
You
a big
stole
fan of
that from
film.
me. Ugh.
Well, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
That's
like
my
saying,
hot take.
It's like saying I stole breathing from you.
Did you do that too?
Yeah, I picked up breathing. Took your idea to breathe.
Right.
But anyways, so I was looking forward to the film. I'm a big fan of comedy, as we've heard.
He's a
plenty
comedy
on the
expert.
show, and then I talked about old school earlier, you know. But anyways, DC films in the past have made me a little skeptical still, despite thinking the trailer looked good. So that was kind of where I was at going in. I was mostly, I don't want to say pleasantly surprised, but like I guess I was entertained and enjoyed the film about as much as I thought I would. I enjoyed the humor a little more than I thought I would. I thought it was funnier than I expected. Where the film did let me down, I think, is in the villain. I think this film has a bit of what I like to call a Spider-Man problem, in the sense that all the stuff with him as a human and all the real life stuff that he's dealing with and problems and the characters when they're not superheroes are very interesting and I really, really enjoy. But the villain to me is very, very bad. I did not like it. I think it's a bit at odds tonally with the rest of the film, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I don't think that it totally worked every time in this film that we shifted tones. But overall, I think it's really entertaining. I really enjoyed the performances from the main two kids, mostly enjoyed the performance from the adult version of Shazam, and I think I'm left with a little bit of questions of why things work the way they were. It seemed like some of the stuff was a little bit unexplained in terms of like the powers and why certain things happen. But mostly this movie is just supposed to be entertaining, and I was fully entertained. I laughed quite a bit. So I'm very positive on this movie end of the day because it's just entertaining.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's where I'm at. So who wants to go next? I guess I'll vote for Chris.
Yeah. Like you, Justin, I wasn't quite sure what to make of this. I actually got to go see this 2 weeks early because of some Fandango event, and I had a great time with that audience because, the people that were there wanted to be there very much so. It was a sold-out crowd. There's times where people were cheering and stuff like that. So it was a very fun experience to see it in that big crowd. Yeah, this film is Big meets Superman, like the fun of being an adult with these, and then all of a sudden these responsibilities kick in, that you have to handle. I like Zachary Levi a lot. I thought his charm and charisma really holds this movie up, along with his good chemistry with Jack Dylan Grazer, who I thought was really good, and they worked really well together. I kind of actually felt bad a little bit for Asher Angel, who plays the younger version of Shazam, and because he didn't get to have as much fun. Zachary Levi got to do all the fun stuff, and Asher Angel kind of got to mope around. But I thought that all three of those guys worked really well together. And you're right, where I had a problem was the villain. You're right, I don't think it tonally fits necessarily. I don't think that there's much of a character behind that. And to me, the villain was very bland. Yes, but ultimately, this is a fun movie, and I think Zachary Levi's performance kind of really holds it up to me. So, yeah. All right, Mike.
Well, I agree that Zachary Levi, with Chris, he's the best thing about the movie. Without him, the movie doesn't work at all.
Exactly.
Like you guys, this is a character I knew almost nothing about, so I didn't really have any expectations for this, other than, I guess, maybe low ones, based on, Justice League and things like that, but not super low. Right, I was still looking forward to it, and I did end up enjoying it. I guess what I will say is, I enjoyed all the performances here. I think Mark Strong, the actor who plays the villain, is doing good work here, considering his character doesn't have the most interesting dialogue or personality.
Yeah.
And I think he looks like he's having a blast doing it. I think Zachary Levi looks like he's having a blast too, and I think that's contagious, that fun. I think Mark Strong is very aware of what movie he's in. I agree, though, that I wish some of his dialogue were more interesting and he had more human elements to him. I think it's nice experiencing like the superhero origin story from the POV of a teenager, 14 years old. That feels pretty fresh, I guess, even though like Spider-Man Homecoming is from the point of view of a teenager. This feels very much like a more realistic teenager, right? Like what a real teenager would do if he got superpowers, which is fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll totally agree with you that Mark Strong is acting well, and like the performance is not anything that's dragging down the villain, like to the point like that I didn't like it. So I'm with you there. Yeah, he's very good.
Yeah, I wanted to differentiate that. Like, be harsh on the villain, not the performance.
Yeah,
sure.
I'm right there with you.
If I had to pick one thing that really sets this movie apart for me more than other superhero films, and that is it has some really nice themes about family and adoption and finding love elsewhere and learning to accept love, even if it's not coming from the place you thought or the place that you primarily wanted. I think that's a nice message for kids to hear, and not many modern superhero movies really focus on teaching these kinds of lessons, you know?
Yeah, definitely not.
I think the movie is to be commended for that. It's got a very big heart.
Yeah.
So bonus points for it being sweet and heartwarming in that department. I think maybe it gets a little sloppy in the third act with some things we can get into later. But overall, it's a very positive film. There are some tonal shifts in the movie that it goes crazy tonally. Like, it goes from like really lighthearted to really, really dark. But I don't think that's a misstep. In fact, I think that movie should lean into it more. The darkness of the villain and some of the crazier things that happen in the movie are, I think, some of the movie's stronger suits.
Yeah, I guess what I would respond to that with it would be maybe it's that the dark tonal shifts are underdeveloped, and because a lot of them come from the villain, right?
Well, let me kind of tell you what it reminded me of.
Sure.
Okay, so this movie reminds me a lot of ways of like movies from the 80s. Specifically, I was thinking of Indiana Jones at a couple places during this movie.
Okay.
And like how it goes really dark and scary in certain places, like the Seven Sins, the little minion demons that he has running around. They're pretty dark and retro looking. I enjoyed the way they looked because they looked kind of like practical things from the 80s, like in a cheesy way, you know? And they're throwing dudes out of windows. And at one point, a person turns to smoke when they touch a magic door. And it's pretty jarring and scary. And it reminded me of a tamer version of Temple of Doom when they pull that guy's heart out of his chest. Or in The Last Crusade when the Nazi drinks the wrong cup and then turns into a skeleton and then the dust, you know? There's a certain scary quality to it that I would have loved if I were a kid. Like, I remember when I was a kid, I would always get scared at the anticipation, like the build up to like the really crazy stuff in the Indiana Jones movies, you know? Mm-hmm. Like when they opened the Ark, I couldn't wait to see the dude's face melt.
Yeah, that was always very kind of scary to me when I was real young.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so like this kind of reminds me of that. Like if you're 5 or 6, I can see it being terrifying. But if you're like 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, I can see like the magic being really scary and jarring when it happens, you know, because it's loud and it's got bass, you know? Yeah. And I don't know. I appreciated some of the darker tones. It didn't feel like a Disney version of things, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. I totally buy that. I think it's just the fact that so much of it stems out of an interesting villain is probably what is making me think negatively on it. But I think, you know, thinking about it in the terms that you're talking about it, I do agree. I like that we're not afraid to like overly like kid watch this movie.
Yeah, kids can handle some dark stuff, I think. If they're old enough, you know. But Chris, what do you think?
I don't. Yeah, it's a thing I don't disagree with you on. You know, I loved watching Indiana Jones and stuff like that. I just don't feel like it works necessarily, and because I don't think that there's much of a character in the villain, so I found myself being bored a lot of times in those scenes.
Well, it's the same villain as like it's like the classic like the opposite of you thing, right? Like. It's that old chestnut, you know, it's like, you are what I couldn't achieve when I was a kid. So I've spent all my life hating you for it, you know, before I even knew who you were. Kind of thing.
Mark Strong's character hasn't grown up either, essentially, right?
Yeah. He's just like a big man child.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I mean, he's not as bad a villain as something like Iron Man 2 villains or something like that. But I agree. He's no Killmonger, you know?
I guess to me, it just felt like that section of the movie for the villain, and we don't have to beleaguer the point too much, but like it felt like that was from the Justice League movies or from the other DC movies that I didn't like very much.
Oh, I disagree with that completely. For all this villain's flaws, I'm not going to defend the villain forever, but it is miles better than anything in Justice League. Miles.
Yeah, I just felt like
it miles better than Jesse Eisenberg and Batman versus Superman.
Is it Doomsday that comes out at the end of that movie?
Yeah.
Well, Doomsday, yeah, of course.
Basically, this is...
I guess what I mean is the tone.
It's
not necessarily
better than Wonder Woman's villain.
Well, that's true, too. Maybe the tone is what I mean. Like this dark tone out of the DC movies that all the DC movies seem to have had thus far. And I didn't necessarily like it too much. That dark tone and that self-seriousness. And then, I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, to me, it looks better just on like actually like the enjoyment of watching it from scene to scene more than like Justice League or Wonder Woman. Like the third act doesn't take place in the land of smoke and orange sky that so many DC movies seem to, you know?
Right.
where it's like this like nowhereville that you're fighting. And it seems like the budget for this one was way less, but on a basic level of looking at it, the third act doesn't fall apart. We're in a place that's real. We can see Ferris wheels and we can see people. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Right.
I think this is a step in the right direction.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's not a spoiler to say that this film is ultimately part of the DC universe, so maybe it's a step in the right direction for that series of films in general. I'm hoping.
Between Aquaman and this one, it seems like they kind of have a new direction, right? Which is like, hey, let's focus on one movie at a time.
Yeah.
Right, instead of trying to quickly, within like a couple of years, play catch up to Marvel, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So one of the things that I don't necessarily have a problem with, but it's something I thought about a lot throughout the movie, and this is one of those things where I felt like certain things were explained in terms of like the powers and how they work. I don't necessarily understand why he becomes an adult when he turns into Shazam. Did they ever explain it and I just zoned out? Like, I don't know why you can't have the powers as a kid, you know?
I don't think so. I think, like, what I want to know is, like, if he were, like, a 70-year-old man, would he still turn into Zachary Levi?
Yeah.
Is the optimum age for the Shazam hero, like, mid-30s?
Exactly. That's
I mean, that's what I took
wonder.
it as, because all the kids, no matter how old they were, all seemed to... Well, I mean, some of those kids were pretty young when they turned into superheroes, so maybe it's, like, 15 years older than you are now. I don't know.
right. Yeah. It's these questions that I was thinking about. I'm left wondering, and I don't know if it's a fault of the movie that they're underexplained or it's just something I should look forward to in what I hope will be a Shazam sequel, because I would go see it.
Probably that.
Now, what I really want to see is like a Shazam movie, but set in a nursing home. Like a old man turning into being a superhero. That'd be cool.
Yeah. Do you think that, I don't know how to pronounce the actor's name, but Jimon Hisu, however you say his name, Heeson?
I think it's Houston.
The guy that played the original, the older wizard Shazam. Do you think that guy was like actually just like 45?
Yeah, I don't know.
he had the Shazam powers, so he actually was much older.
These are all questions that we just don't know.
I don't know. Maybe it's a good thing. I like, maybe, sometimes having these questions is...
Yeah, we just complained about Pet
thing.
Sematary,
Yeah. I didn't think
Over-explaining.
Jamon Hussein, or however you pronounce his name, I didn't think he was Shazam. I thought he was just a wizard looking for someone to take that mantle. Like he was the one searching.
Take the powers.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't know. I could be wrong on that.
Well,
I don't know, because he was like, say
joke.
my name.
Did he say
he
my
did.
name?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he said say my name, Shazam. So you're wrong. Cool. Well, does anybody have anything else before we move on to spoilers?
Just real quick, I liked Jack Dylan Grazer. I think that kid is very talented.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's got chemistry with pretty much everybody. I really enjoyed the foster family dynamic in this movie. I enjoyed the mother and the father and all of the siblings.
Yes.
Agreed.
Definitely agree.
We haven't talked about them much, but I really think that they are the heart and soul of the movie. Zachary Levi is incredibly charming, and I hope that guy does a whole lot from here on out.
Man,
Yeah.
I can imagine a version of this movie without Zachary Levi that just is awful. Like you get Jim Carrey or something. It could have been really bad. But Zachary Levi, I think he does such a great job.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said initially, the human stuff, everything going on in the real life, in the normal world when they're kids, I actually think all of this stuff is really great.
Yeah. And there is one scene in this movie later on that we'll talk about here in a minute in spoilers, I'm sure, that is a complete gut punch.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we'll talk about it. I have it on my notes.
Yeah. Okay,
I'm
so
pretty sure we're on the same page.
I'm pretty sure it's if you have a heart, then
It got punched.
yeah, it got punched in that scene. So I recommend it. 3.5 stars, something like that.
Yeah, I'm at a solid 3.5.
I'm at 3, I think, but it's solid. Yeah.
I like the color and like the design of his suit, like the corniness of it. Like in the trailers, I thought it looked really bad because it looked like a muscle suit, like George Michael from Arrested Development,
Right.
But in the context of the movie, I think it works a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not sure if like the suit is some sort of reflection of your own personality.
I don't know. I like the element when he was like, maybe maybe he didn't get to pick his suit, like whenever they were criticizing it.
Yeah. Yeah, they address it so it works, right? It's kind of funny.
Exactly.
that makes sense.
Okay, now spoilers.
All right, let's go.
No, I guess Rosebud is just a piece of the jigsaw puzzle.
You want a cigarette you got up there? I'll tell you all about it.
Things are going to start happening to me now.
And here we go.
So what did you guys think of the twist? And I don't know if it is a twist really, but the part where they all become Shazam.
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was really fun. Like it seemed like, okay, now this is going to get real fun.
Right, yeah. I thought it was interesting. I wasn't totally a fan of the way some of like the adult versions were behaving.
Yeah.
It's not as charming as like when Billy is a superhero, you know, Billy Batson.
Yeah, definitely not.
But I did like Adam Brody.
Yeah. It took me a while to realize it was Adam Brody. Just
I know, I was like,
seen
who
him
is
in a
this
while.
guy? I wasn't expecting Adam Brody to be in a movie in 2019.
No, and I was reading that he was supposed to be in a Justice League movie forever ago for DC, but that eventually got canned and shelved.
George Miller of Mad Max fame was supposed to do that, I believe.
Oh,
yeah, that would have been awesome.
And another person who was one of the adult superheroes was supposed to be in that as well. So this almost to me feels like DC making up to him, like, yeah, you can be
Like the beginning of The Force Awakens,
characters.
whenever Max von Sydow, the very first line is, "This will begin to make things right."
Exactly. Yeah, but it was fun, and it was a satisfying moment for him to realize that, and for them to come together and work as a family, you know, tying in with the whole theme of being a family. It was very satisfying to me. I liked it. It was heartwarming.
Yeah.
Very much agree on that. And that's why Mark Strong never stood a chance. Does he have a villain name in this? What's his name?
Villain
man. Dr. Savannah.
That's right. Because I kept thinking of Zhivago for like the first half of the movie.
Dr. Zhivago?
Yeah, I just kept thinking of Dr. Zhivago.
That's funny. Yeah, no, he didn't stand a chance. And I guess while we're in this moment, I will say something negative, because most part I've been pretty positive on the movie. And one of the things that I did not find satisfying is the ultimate way that they had to defeat Mark Strong. I thought that it was unsatisfying because it relied on them like pulling all 7 out of the body, but that also relies on the villain just making a dumb decision and making a mistake. And to me, that felt like, why would they be that way? Why would they, if that's your weakness, like, sure, you shouldn't expose that. And that just bothered me a little bit.
Sure. Well, I agree, but also I think there's a cool parallel to them. Mark Strong, we've already kind of said he's like the anti-Shazam, right? Like no teamwork, no family, all alone all the time. He kills his family, you know?
Yeah.
He's that cool, you know? So it's kind of like dividing up his powers amongst like the 7 sins is a lot like Shazam dividing his powers amongst his siblings.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know if this is the case, but I took it as like whenever they are all powerful, they're each a little less powerful, just like him.
They being the 7 sins? No,
like the Shazams, the family Shazam.
Family.
That magic is being divided up amongst 5 people now.
Yeah, they each had like an element to them, I think, they didn't all have all of his powers.
Right, so there's an interesting parallel there for the 7 sins, right? Like, which is that spreading the powers out in both cases is the key to one's victory and the key to one's defeat.
Yeah, that makes sense. And just having someone to share the powers with as opposed to going alone, like we've said.
Exactly. So it may not be strong, but it was enough there to where I could get behind it on a thematic level.
Yeah, thematically, it definitely works. I just was hoping for a little bit more tact needed to defeat the villain. And while we're talking about him killing his family, that is one of the tonal dark things that I thought really worked. Like, it made me think, like, whoa, what could happen? Because I did not expect that.
Yeah. And it felt good, too, because his dad was a real big dick at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, so is his brother.
Yeah, and I was like, they're being unnecessarily mean to this kid right now.
Right.
So I don't blame him. I'd have thrown him out a window, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy was
with my
Lex
demon
Luthor's...
gargoyle monsters.
Yeah. Lesson learned, everybody, and by everybody I mean you and me, Chris, and I guess anybody who talks to us on Twitter, be nice to Mike.
Yeah. Don't call me names whenever I'm in the back seat trying to tell you guys something.
He's vindictive.
And also, if he says Shazam, he turns like 14 feet taller.
I know. You don't even know what size I am now because I've said it so much throughout the course of this show.
Yeah. I do want to talk about one moment when the film was like really working for some kids in the theater, and that's why like it kind of sucked me in a little bit. I was like, oh man, like if I was a kid, this would maybe like really, really work for me. It's when towards the end, whenever they're fighting Mark Strong and Shazam is falling to the ground, and to this point he hasn't been able to fly, and he like the screen goes black as he's about to hit the ground, and then we come back and he's like hovering above the ground and he's learned to fly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever they came back from black and he was hovering above the ground, one kid in the theater, I would probably like 2 or 3 rows away from me, just loudly went like
Nice.
so loud,
So
and being
great.
the only kid doing it, like, and it was the most genuine like shock gasp I've ever heard
Nice.
in like a theater, and it was so infectious. I was like,
Yeah, that's the
"Oh,
best.
awesome. I'm so glad that worked for someone. Like I loved it. Made me so happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we kind of hinted at it earlier, but how about that scene with the mom?
Whew,
Yikes.
I got so teared up. Like one tear came down my face. I didn't cry.
Yeah.
Damn it, I got teared up.
That was rough. I wasn't expecting that. So that really got to me in the theater. That's the kind of darkness that I didn't see coming. And I was like, whoa, I'm surprised they went there. It wasn't the throwing people out windows or turning them to smoke.
Oh yeah.
It was very
Yeah.
much, this is where I was like, this movie has a soul.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is one of the things that I think back really fondly on the movie. This is a tonal shift that did work for me. And I don't want to say I didn't expect it, because I kind of did, because they did so much work with the family. And so
Yeah, I saw it
like
coming,
needing to
but
embrace his new family. But
I thought it'd be a lot easier to sit through.
yeah. I guess I was surprised at how effective it was and how much it moved me, because it did. It was so good, and that's something to comment or compliment Asher Angel for. He doesn't get to do a lot of the fun stuff like Chris said, but in this scene he's really good.
I agree.
Yeah. I don't think it works for me quite as well as it did for you guys, but yes, I liked it, and I think Asher Angel is really good in it. You're right.
So your heart didn't get punched, like maybe it got flicked a little bit.
It got
Or
flicked.
maybe
it
not
got
hit at all.
heavily thumped.
Okay, at least it got something.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay, so one thing I did want to go over some of the points in the movie that really made me laugh, because I do think like a lot of the humor in the movie really worked for me. Some of it didn't, but mostly it did. I think one of my favorite bits in the movie is during the big fight scene with Mark Strong and Shazam, when they're like flying up in the air in the city and they're really far away, and Mark Strong's giving his like tough villain monologue.
Yes.
And then we cut to Shazam and she was like, I can't hear you.
Oh, yeah. That was funny.
Yeah.
And he goes for like a really long time. He's like, man, I can't hear you at all.
Yeah. And then you see like the really wide shot of Mark Strong, and you just like, he's really muffled and you can't understand him. Like, I think it's really funny. And I was so happy to see that sort of thing called out in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agreed.
Like, especially because so often villains are kind of doing that moody, low, growly talk that like they're not even necessarily yelling, and they're, I don't know, half a mile away from each other and you can hear them. Like, that was really, really funny, and I didn't see it coming.
Yeah, I agree, especially because Mark Strong's character is so mustache twirly most of the time. So to deflate that a little bit in that scene, I think is smart.
Yeah, it works because of that. It's one of the things that his character did build to, like, appropriately, for sure. 2 more really well executed and well set up jokes that I enjoyed. Or, well, maybe one's not that well set up, but the first one being when they're in the gas station and he finds out he's bulletproof, and they immediately go to like, shoot him in the face. We don't know if it's his suit or his skin, so shoot him in the face.
That whole sequence is pretty good.
That made me laugh, and I think one of the best setup jokes that's like A+++ joke is whenever they have to escape like the other realm, and they're like, think back to a place like somewhere else and we'll go there, and it cuts back to them at like the gentleman's club.
Yeah. That was
They're
pretty
all in
good.
there.
All the characters have a different reaction to it. And then one of them, which one's covered in glitter? One of them's covered in glitter.
I think it's the little girl, the
little-
youngest sister, right?
Darla.
Yeah, and it's just this one-off like joke in the montage when they were having like superhero fun. I'm just setting that up. It was a great payoff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Love
agreed. I will say a joke that didn't work for me at all. I felt like they went back to the Santa Claus well a little too much. Like that ongoing joke with the Santa Claus.
Yeah.
They went
Yeah,
back
I'm
to
with
that
you.
too many times for me.
Yeah, and it didn't quite work the first time, I think, which is part of the problem.
Yeah, so each time it's just compounding what doesn't work.
Yep. Unfortunate. Unfortunate, but oh well. But yeah, so that's the jokes I wanted to highlight and say that the humor really works a lot more often than it doesn't work.
Agreed.
So
all right, so we do have a listener question sent in from Matt Ward at Real Matt Ward on Twitter and friend of the show. He was on a recent episode where we talked about A Most Violent Year. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So thanks for writing in, Matt. Did you find that the Shazam trailer made it seem like a brighter film tonally than it ended up being? It seems DC films continuously feature much darker villains than necessary.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of covered that, the film definitely has a much darker villain than the rest of the film, and it's definitely surprised me how dark it was compared to the trailer. So I definitely think the trailer seemed like a much brighter, more happy film. I don't know that I agree that he kind of seems like he might think that the villains are unnecessarily dark. I don't know that it's that way in this movie. What do you guys think?
To be honest, I don't remember the villain from Justice League, so I don't know that he's too dark, other than he just sucks too bad.
Sure.
Aquaman, I don't remember the villain being too evil, other than just like a normal villain. I think I see what he's saying on this one, right? Which is like, you might feel like it's a different film than what you were sold.
Yeah.
And I think it works better than if he were boring and not dark.
Sure. Yeah, I can't argue
I guess
with
that makes sense.
But ultimately, I don't know. The DC films as a whole, I think, are generally just kind of a mess at this point, so it's hard to see like ongoing trends. But I will say that this one struck me as much darker than anything in Wonder Woman, Justice League, or Aquaman. I don't know.
What I will say is that I think that generally speaking, the DC films have tried to go much darker than they need to be on the whole.
Yeah,
and that's
true.
something that I think feels refreshing about this film. So I don't know that it's specifically the villains from other films that seem darker than necessary.
Yeah, I think the heroes seem darker than necessary.
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant from earlier on, is the villain seems like he's something out of the other DC movies in this fun, goofy superhero movie. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. But like I said, it works for me like entirely on that like 80s movie way, where it feels like things used to get pretty dark in kids' movies,
Yeah.
Like E.T.
Yeah, until they special effect replaced all the guns with walkie-talkies.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Got less dark.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm picking on Spielberg, but I guess because I can't think of anyone else who made movies in the 80s for kids. But
there's some dark stuff in Goonies.
Goonies.
There you go, Goonies. Thank
dark.
you. There's some dark stuff in Goonies. There are murderers chasing children.
Even Home Alone. There are thieves, I guess. Real criminals trying to kill a kid.
Yeah.
But that kid deserves it.
Monster.
Hot take. All right. Well, does anybody have anything else they want to say about Shazam before we end this review?
No. Thanks for the question, Matt.
I want to put out a challenge to anybody that's listened to this podcast so far. We will know, but tell us whether Mike is his normal size or 14 feet taller by how many times he said Shazam.
I don't know why it's 14 feet taller. I feel like even in the movie they don't get 14 feet taller.
I don't know.
Well,
it just feels like what he said.
Feet. It was 14 feet. You were 14 feet tall is what I said, not that you were 14 feet taller.
Oh, I see.
So it was 7 feet taller. Well, no, you're not 7 foot. I don't know. What are you, 8? It was like 8'4" taller?
The logistics of it don't matter. Just tell us whether Mike is taller or his regular size self.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Shazam. Now guess.
Right. I think I'm safe. It's safe to say that does it for this episode, right?
Yeah, I think we're...
Yeah. I think we've gone as far as we can with that.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. And of course, as always, thank you, Jake Wagner Russell, for doing our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bopscotch.
All right, so stay tuned to this podcast channel. We recently put out another Casually Criterion episode on Safety Last, the Harold Lloyd silent film. By the time you're listening to this, there should also be a poll on Twitter out for you to vote on the next film that we will cover for the April Casually Criterion. And also... stay tuned. We may be doing Hellboy next week. We will have to see.
Maybe High Life will make it to our theaters. So cross your fingers, and we can all.
I would
watch
say
it.
That's highly unlikely.
Well,
Life.
one can hope.
Well, if you have any suggestions on films that you would prefer us to cover over Hellboy that are wide release or that are coming out on VOD or wherever, you can send those suggestions to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at casualcinemedia. You can also send us questions on Hellboy, since that's most likely what we'll cover. I don't know.
It certainly seems that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless something amazing happens.
A miracle. Thanks so much for listening, guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Shazam!